Hi, hello, and welcome to another video. I'm Bloom, if you don't know me already. In this video, I'm working on a project that took me over a year to complete, which I have no good reasoning for, besides the fact that it is a personal project for my portfolio, so there wasn't a deadline, there wasn't a client, there wasn't any money, so that sort of makes it hard to stick with it, especially when I'm also working on actual client projects, because obviously those take priority. So yeah, this project took me quite a while to finish, but I'm really happy with the results. So if you want to see how it went, then you can stick around. Basically, I had the idea that I wanted to work on a project for my portfolio to have a little bit more experience with children's illustration, because it's something that I've sort of started dabbling in, but I don't really have a lot of experience there. So my idea was to do a retelling of Goldilocks, basically, and create some spreads that could fit into a Goldilocks type story. I'm not a writer myself, so I didn't want to write a whole story just to have a project to illustrate, so I thought using an existing story would be a good way to get around that. So for a long time I did a lot of different sketches and a lot of my sketchbooks and a lot of papers lying around my house, and I just never really took it anywhere, I guess. It just, all these sketches just compiled, but nothing really led anywhere, so I think I was missing a lot of structure and organization. So I was hoping that this video would force me to create a little bit more structure and actually move forward with steps that are hoping to reach an end product instead of just a lot of ideas running around. So let's see how that goes. The first thing I did was to compile all the sketch ideas that I had, everything from the 3 different sketchbooks I was working in and multiple leaves of paper that were lying around the house, into one file on Procreate. I then refined everything, made all the changes that need to. I almost always work digitally when I have to refine sketches. It's just much easier to undo and move things around. I quickly realized that I could just continue sketching forever, but then this project would not progress. So for that reason, I made a Milanote. So I thought this would help to structure my thoughts a little bit. I also included a lot of pieces by other artists because it's my first time working in this style and creating a children's book. I was originally going to do more spreads, but I had to be realistic with how much work I was actually able to complete. So in the end, I decided to focus on 6 key spreads. I've been using Milanote for a while. I use it for all my art related things. I have some for my shop. I have some stuff for planning YouTube, and then I also have a section for planning my projects. So I decided it was a good time to collect my thoughts, collect my sketches, organize things a little bit, make a list of what needs to be done. Also, what I really like about Milanote is that I can put my sketches and my reference images in one board, and that way I can sort of see everything that I need for each of the spreads in one location. One of the things at the top of my to-do list was to decide finally what style I'm going to use, because I've been doing a lot of sketches and all my sketches have been in pencil, and I will not be illustrating this book in pencil, so I need to choose which direction to head, which is difficult. I already decided that I didn't want to do it digitally because I'm pretty confident with digital and I want a more childlike, hand-drawn kind of style. At this point, it had also been a while since I drew these characters, so I was also just trying to familiarize myself and remember exactly how I wanted them to be drawn and what they looked like. I think I took about a 1 or 2 month break in between doing all the sketches and then finally deciding to power through and finish everything. So some of the mediums I tried out were color pencil, markers, watercolor, and then I didn't want to work digitally, but I tried to import my traditional sketches and see if I wanted to color them in digitally so that I could still keep some of the handmade feel, but maybe speed up some of the process. I also really love the texture of pencil, so I really wanted the pencil drawing to look good colored digitally, but unfortunately I did not really like the results. And then also for a lot of the styles, I'm trying a different medium for the line work versus a different medium for like the base colors. So I'm also trying out the different combinations. In the end, I decided that I like the top left option the best, which is a marker base with color pencil line work, and then some details in color pencil as well. This is the setup of my Procreate artwork. I'm using the Page Assist tool, which turns each spread into a page, and it's supposed to mimic a bit like sketching in a sketchbook. I found this super helpful just to be able to flip through the pages quickly, edit something there, add something there, copy something there. It also helps to sort of see the flow of your story. And I also discovered this app, which is called Paper by WeTransfer, where you can export the images from your Procreate as PNG files or JPEG files and then import them as photos onto the app. And then it creates this little digital sketchbook that you can sort of flip through. I think this is really cool as well, especially if you're working on a full book. For me, I only have a couple of spreads, but it already sort of helps see how the story moves. Since I was sketching digitally, I thought it might be handy to also plan my colors in digitally, but I soon realized that this was really difficult because digital, obviously, you have all the colors available to you in the world. And because I'm planning to use marker for my final pieces and I only have a set amount of markers, it makes more sense to plan my colors with markers. So I got a separate sheet of paper. I swatched all the browns at the top because my bears were going to be browns, so I could decide which colors to use exactly. And then I create these little thumbnail sketches traced from my iPad and color them in with the markers. And if I wasn't satisfied with the colors that I chose the first time, I could just retrace it and start again and make all the changes necessary. I found this way working really helpful, especially because I haven't used these markers a lot, so I'm not really aware of which colors to use or which ones are my favorites and how they blend. I also, for the first time, have been like layering colors to create new colors, which I think is really interesting for these pieces. For this thumbnail, I decided to do 2 right away because I knew I was going to struggle. I completed the thumbnails for the rest of all of my spreads, and I also tried to choose similar markers each time. So for example, the brown of the trees is the same brown of the bear, so that there feels like there's a cohesive color scheme throughout. Also, because I have so many markers, I really needed to limit the amount to use so that it wouldn't feel all over the place. With the style and medium chosen, all the spreads sketched, and all the colors chosen, I think I'm ready to move on to creating these pieces. Using the sketches from my iPad, I decided to trace directly onto the paper. I do this really often just because my iPad sketches are the most refined version and it's just a lot easier. If you triple press the home button, then you can turn on guided access, which basically freezes the screen, which means you can't like move things around. I think it's actually meant for children and babies so that they can't like mess around with the screen. I don't know, but I always use this myself when I'm tracing from my iPad because it's just makes everything much easier. Using the Uhuhu markers, I tried to use them in sort of like a circular motion to create some depth and the feeling of fur, and that would combat the streakiness sometimes. I'm not fully happy with every single color because I only have a limited amount, but I'm planning to edit those digitally if necessary. For example, the baby bear is a little bit too dark, I think, and you sort of miss the details, so I might have to lighten him up. And the suitcase is a little bit too close to the fur of the big bear. So small things like this, I'm planning to do little edits when I scan them in, and then I can digitally change some things. But the main thing that I wanted was to make sure that the hand-drawn feel of traditional stays in the piece because I really love how that looks. Some things I kept in mind while working on these spreads was playing around with size, so I really wanted the baby bear to seem a lot smaller than the big bear. I also had to take into consideration where the fold of the page would be in the middle of the spread. And something I wasn't really used to when making illustrations is leaving quite a lot of white space, so I didn't do a lot of backgrounds or full bleed illustrations because that would be quite costly printing-wise. So a lot of children's books leave a lot of white to just keep the color of the paper so that you don't have to print entire spreads each time. Something that's a little bit missing is more spot illustration styles where it's just many small illustrations over the spread instead of one large illustration that spans both spreads. But these will just be things that I keep in mind when I work on some future projects as well. Once I got to my 5th spread, my ink on the brown that I was using for my big bear unfortunately started running out, and it became really streaky and hard to use, and it just wasn't looking great. So unfortunately I didn't end up finishing this spread, which means I also didn't end up finishing the 6th spread. So I only have 4 spreads in the end, but the 4 that I made I feel really, really good about. I'm often very ambitious when it comes to projects, so this was a case of I need to focus on quality over quantity, so that's what I went with. So I felt okay leaving these 2 extra spreads out. And then my last step was to create a little bit of a hand-drawn alphabet that I could use to add the type to the spreads afterwards. So I finished all of the spreads. I technically finished them many, many months ago. I'm now already in my new house, and then I rediscovered them when I was moving house, and I was like, oh, right, I wanted to finish this project that I never finished. And I was really close to the finish line because I had finished all the spreads, which was a lot of the work that I was putting off for a long time. The problem occurred when I had to get them scanned at a print store, and I hate print stores because they're very stressful to me. So I went to several print stores and checked all of the scanners they had available, and they were all like very basic document scanners, and none were like good enough to do like high quality art scanning. So I was like, okay, I'll get back to this project eventually, I guess. And now's the time because I bought a scanner. So I have my own scanner that I can use now, so I can make sure that the prints are high quality at whatever DPI I want. The colors are gonna come out good. So yes, many months have passed, but the next step is going to be to scan in all of the spreads. And I would like to create some small text layouts to try and really make them feel like a book spread. Right now they're just illustrations. So yeah, I can finally move on to the next step of this project. So let's do that now. All my pieces are bigger than A4, and I only have an A4 scanner, so that just means that I have to scan them twice and probably digitally merge them into one, which I think will be quite simple. Originally, I saw that my scanner had a smart scanner function where I think they would be able to do that, but I couldn't figure out the system and it wasn't really working, so I decided to do it in Photoshop myself instead. And this was really simple. I just had to align them in a good spot, even if the colors or like there was a bit of shading that didn't match perfectly. When I did the auto blend mode in Photoshop, it corrected the coloring automatically too, so that was really handy. Honestly, it was just aligning and then pressing the button and then cropping, and it was already there, so this was very simple. I also did some really minimal changes to brightness, saturation, contrast, but the rest of the editing I planned to do on my iPad, so I just exported them and brought them to my iPad. As I mentioned earlier, I lightened up the bear because I felt like he was a little bit too dark compared to the rest of the illustration. And then I just did some extra outlining with a pencil from Procreate, which I think looks quite realistic. And then for some of the other ones, I also did some minor color changing. For example, this house was very gray and cool toned, which I thought was a bit distracting, so I turned it a little bit more warm toned. I added this shadow on the bed to give it a little bit more dimension because it felt a little bit flat. This spread is one of my favorites. I really, really love how it turned out, but I did do some small edits to the girl because I felt like she wasn't really working very well. I don't know, I think it was blending too much into the color of the bed maybe, so I added the brown outline around her skin tone and around the hair as well. And then I ended up changing the color of the hair a little bit because it felt a bit too green and I wanted it a bit warmer and a bit more like orangey toned. And then finally for this final spread, I just moved the little bear a little bit because his hand was interacting with the table in a way that I didn't like, especially because they were both quite dark brown tones. It felt a little bit muddy and hard to read. Now that all the little edits were made and I added the text and created them into a bit more of a finished final spread, I looked for my mockups because for my portfolio I would like to present them in a book format just because it will feel a little bit more finished. I found this simple open book mockup from Unblast, which works out perfectly for what I need. The only issue was that the book was a bit too narrow for my spreads, so I ended up just editing the mockup a bit and basically just widening the pages. And then I basically just replaced the images and repeated these steps for each of my spreads, and then we were done. Finally. So these are the final spreads that I ended up with. It is a lot less than I originally planned to do, but considering this project has taken me, I think, around a year, I'm actually just happy for it to be finished and for me to be able to include it in my portfolio. And the spreads that I ended up with, I am really, really happy with. For my first time doing anything like this, I'm pretty proud of myself. I think they look really nice. I do see quite a lot of things that I think I can improve on, but for a start, I'm really happy with it. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. That would be really helpful. And I hope you have a great day.